so everyone who's watching understands what's going on in this particular style of presentation that we've set up. The way this is going to work is we being me, Ryan, and Ian, are going to talk about our topics over top this video, and the video is a video of me playing Final Fantasy VII, which is a game that came out in 1997, aka during our era, and since I'm doing video games of the era, I thought it would be appropriate for me to put a game in the era gameplay behind it, and since I happen to own this game, that's what's going to be in the background. So in case any of you were wondering what's going on in the back, or not necessarily the background, but just the video in general, then here's your explanation. And at the end of our separate presentations about our topics, I will explain a bit more about this game in general and what kind of relevance it had to the game industry during the 1990s. Enjoy the presentation. Starting this presentation, I will talk about video games of the 1990s. I felt this was probably the most important thing to start with in this presentation so that I can justify the background that you're seeing at the moment being gameplay of Final Fantasy VII and being related to the video games topic, so I thought it would be appropriate to start the presentation with that. 1990s was a big era for video games because it was like a mid-time for video games in general since they're a relatively new concept, so this is about the middle of the history of video games in general. The 1990s, or at least the beginning of the 1990s, was when solitaire hit computers, which drew in many people who wouldn't usually play games, like your completely technologically inept grandma, because solitaire is a simple card game, and putting it on the computers and free made it pretty widely accessible, so it was actually a huge hit. In 1991, Sonic the Hedgehog was created to rival Nintendo's Mario icon. It didn't really work in the end, since nowadays, as we all know, Mario is much more popular than Sonic. But during the time, Sonic and Mario went head-and-head all the time, and it was definitely, when you thought about video games, you thought of Mario versus Sonic, because that was the big thing at the moment. Mortal Kombat and Doom were released during the 1990s, which were introduced the ESRB rating system due to their blood and gore. The ESRB rating system is basically a system that rates video games to keep adults aware of what their children are playing, since there was lots of outcry from adults from their kids buying more things like Mortal Kombat and Doom and not knowing what they were getting themselves into. The PlayStation released in 1995, which introduced the Tomb Raider series, which took off, and the series still exists and is very popular today. Many critics at the time said Lara Croft was an example of sexism in video games because of the way she was designed. I can definitely see where they were coming from with that, but if it was true or not could be debated. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which was possibly one of the best Zelda games of all time and is still called such today, was released. Final Fantasy VII was released, which revolutionized the storytelling of video games as a whole. This game is what you're seeing in the background of me talking right now. Final Fantasy VII also was the first to use 3D polygon graphics, which are used today in greater effect, and it was really the first game to popularize the idea of using these 3D graphics. It also showed that its story could get really complicated and very long. It has a very nice story, almost like a book, I'd say. Yeah, so moving on, our next topic would be Bill Clinton's impeachment. Now, Bill Clinton was impeached mostly due to his secret sexual relations to Monica Lewinsky. Both of the two denied having any relations when they were asked, but sexual actions were taken in the White House between the two, and later Clinton was also charged with sexual harassment for the situation. He wasn't exactly impeached because of him taking sexual actions and cheating on his own wife in the White House like this, but rather was impeached because of the lying about the situation and the not being honest. If he didn't lie, he might not have been impeached at all. It was evident that Bill Clinton was also promising Lewinsky employment in return for her keeping their relations secret. Clinton had obstructed justice by telling multiple people to remain silent about the affair and was impeached for that reason. He was the second president to be impeached in American history. finally, the culture wars of the 1990s. The culture wars of this time was basically a polarization in American politics and culture. Some of the biggest debate issues that were part of these culture wars were abortion, gun policies, separation of church and state, privacy, recreational drugs, censorship, and homosexuality. People took sides for their views and also often argued or protested their position on some of these issues. A good example of how crazy this got is the abortion issues and what happened with that situation. The court agreed they may not ban abortions in any state in 1992, but an abortion protester, Michael Griffin, shot Dr. David Gunn outside of a clinic and was later sentenced to a life in prison. Many other people were murdered over this controversy as well. Of later, the abortion debate in America shifted to ban late abortions, but Bill Clinton vetoed that bill. Two bombs blasted outside of an Atlanta building containing an abortion clinic. 6 people were injured, and the clinic is left in ruins, and the blast blows out the windows across the street. It's kind of insane how crazy things about just these small disagreements about things like this got. It really didn't need to resort to violence like that, is my take. And moving on to our next topic, Ryan.
Okay, so the Persian Gulf War was a international conflict that brought in almost everyone throughout the world, and it was triggered by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait that happened in 1990 through 1991. So it all started off with the Iraqi president Saddam Hussein ordered the invasion of Kuwait in early August 1990. And due to what Saddam Hussein said, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other Arabian powers called the United States and the other Western nations to help. So the entire Persian Gulf War begins with the United States leading an air offense, which is known as the Operation Desert Storm. The Operation Desert Storm lasted around 42 days until George H.W. Bush called a ceasefire on February 28th. Though by the time that the ceasefire was called, most of the Iraqi forces in Kuwait either surrendered or fled. The entire war had ended with the United Nations calling a brokered ceasefire in August 1988. The powers had tried to negotiate a peace treaty. Though during the time, the United States and Britain patrolled the skies over Iraq, so then they could discuss in peace. The powers had tried to negotiate without intervention by United States and other powers outside the Gulf region, but it was too much of a threat. So going back to the aircrafts hovering over the sky, the Iraqi occasionally did exchange fire with the aircrafts patrolling the sky. Okay, so the O.J. Simpson trial was the charging of O.J. Simpson for the slashing death of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, along with her friend, Ron Goldman. The trial went through January 25th, 1995 through October 2nd, 1995. So the trial was characterized as the trial of the century due to how international the trial went. It went through 11 months, and the opening statements were said on January 24th of 1995. The verdict was announced on October 3rd, 1995, and O.J. Simpson was cleared on 2 counts of murder. Though the time that he was charged, he went on a police chase, which was caught on live TV, watched by 95 million viewers. O.J. Simpson had paid the survivors of the families, like the 2 families, like all the members, $33.5 million. Um, so music during this time was starting to get really big. Some more popular styles were starting to be created during this time. That would include soul, funk, along with jazz. Due to the popular styles, many people started like mixing the genres, creating more genres. Overall, the 1990s were very difficult to pin down as everyone was trying their own different styles. Uh, During this time, it was the time that music had shifted the most. There were a lot of great famous bands. Some of them are still around today and making music. Some of the famous bands during the time would be Nirvana, Green Day, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blink 182, and the most famous one that I know of would be the Backstreet Boys.
Internet and personal computers were important in the 1990s. Starting off, Internet went from 4 hosts to 300,000 hosts in the beginning of the 1990s. Some places such as Argentina, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Chile, Greece, India, Ireland, South Korea, Spain, and Switzerland were connected to the Internet as well. Search tools were made and used, as well as institutes being brought online as well in the 1990s. Moving on into 1991, the growth and widespread of access to the Internet continually increased. Congress passed a law to create the NREN, also known as the National Research and Education Network. Pretty Good Privacy, or PGP, was created as well in the 1990s. Over 100 countries ended up being connected to the Internet later in 1991. There were around 600,000 hosts at the time, and 5,000 separate networks were also available. In 1992, the Internet Society, also known as ISOC, confirms that the coming of age of people working professionally in the industries involving computers and Internet was increasing. There were now over 7,500 networks in 1992. There were over 1 million computers connected in 1992, and the World Wide Web was growing extremely along the time. As Internet popularized, Photoshop was also created in February 19, 1990 by brothers John and Thomas Knoll. Photoshop is an image editing program made by Adobe Systems. The Oklahoma City bombing was another major event that happened in the 1990s. This was a terrorist attack that happened in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, in the United States. It occurred on April 19, 1995. It all started with a homemade bomb that was planted into a rental truck in Oklahoma. This bomb ended up exploding, which caused tons of damage towards a specific building called the Alfred P. Mora Federal Building. 168 people were killed due to this bomb exploding. 19 of the people were kids, and over 500 people were injured as well. The building was completely destroyed and taken down, and in return for the building being completely destroyed, a park was made where the building used to stand. This ended up being the deadliest terrorist assault in the United States before 9/11. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were accused and arrested shortly after the bombing went off. They were former United States Army soldiers. Timothy was thought to be a suspect, and his friend Terry had ended up surrendering. Timothy was arrested on 11 counts of murder, conspiracy, and using mass destruction weapons. Terry ended up avoiding the death penalty, but was sentenced to a life in prison. Timothy and Terry were said to be part of the Patriot movement as well. This terrorist attack had just caused lots of damage overall, and just really told the United States about the bad things that can happen. Movies were also the rage during the 1990s. There were many classic movies and well-known movies that capitalized during the time. Some of these classic movies and well-known movies include Romeo and Juliet, Titanic, Edward Scissorhands, Dumb and Dumber, Terminator 2, Fight Club, The Matrix, Men in Black, Home Alone, Jurassic Park, and The Lost World Jurassic Park. Titanic was one of the highest making movies at the time, making over $1 billion. Disney movies also had an extreme uproar in the 1990s. They started out capitalizing at the end of the 1980s, but many of the Disney movies were also made in the 90s. Some of the movies made in the 90s were Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Muppets Christmas Carol, The Nightmare Before Christmas, The Lion King, Pocahontas, Toy Story, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, A Bug's Life, Tarzan, Toy Story 2, and Fantasia 2000. Other popular movies that had made tons of cash during the time were Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace, Independence Day, Ghost, and Twister. Some other popular movies during the time include Batman Forever, The Mummy, Mrs. Doubtfire, and Apollo 13.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the extra segment of the video where I will play a bit more of Final Fantasy VII and explain a bit more what this game is about. So, as you can probably see from this, Final Fantasy VII is a pretty old game. It was released in 1997, which is the era that we are researching. Final Fantasy VII is basically the first game to use, or at least one of the first games to use polygon graphics. As you can see, they're kind of 3D, but they're kind of not. It's really weird, I describe it. It's an early technology, so it makes sense why it's weird. We still use graphics in this kind of way today. It's just much more advanced in the way that we do it. So basically what we've got here, I'll explain the story, of course, because this game, other major focus is story. There's a ton of detailed story and plot that goes into this game, and the story is actually really interesting. The main story at this point is that our main protagonists are a group called Avalanche, who live in this massive city, which is very dystopian, called Midgar. And Midgar is basically powered by the Shinra company, which is a power company that basically owns the entire city, and they use power that is, they get their energy by draining basically life energy from the earth, which is slowly killing the planet. Our group, Avalanche here, with its main character being Cloud, who we control here, is basically trying to, and I'm in the Shinra building right now, their main headquarters, are basically trying to go and stop President of Shinra from draining the planet of its life energy further. What's currently happened is our heroes tried to raid the Shinra building, and they got caught and put in prison cells. But when they woke up, all the guards were basically dead, and there's this trail of blood leading somewhere, and that's basically where I've left off. Now, another important part of this game is the fact that it's got a turn-based battle system in which the graphics look a lot better than this part of the game that we're in right now. Once you get into a battle, which I'm going to try to do right now so I can show it off. Yep, there we go. That scared me a little bit. But here, now that we're in a battle, you can see it actually looks a bit better. And basically, it's like real time, but also selection-y. So you pick a move, but when you're picking a move, time still passes, so you gotta be quick about what you're doing. And in that way, the game is quite interesting, especially compared to those of its time. Ah, shoot, is she gonna get poisoned? Okay, no. Here we go. I gotta hit the... I got... So here, let me explain a bit more. Where I currently am now is the top of the Shinra building, and what is happening right next is, right after where I am right now, this battle, is we're gonna get to the top of the Shinra building to the president's office, where, I will be able to find the Shinra's president and hopefully stop him. I actually do not know how the story of this game goes, I just know what I know so far. I think it was the first time I managed to not spoil myself on this kind of thing. Oh my gosh, that thing was a head? I didn't know that. I thought it was just like a bucket. That's weird. Usually the battle music is better than this, but because of the tense situation at the moment, it's kind of just replaced by creepy music. Oh, I got Deadly Waste. Fun. Alright, let's head to the president of Shinra. Oh, there he is. Looks kind of wacky, huh? But, I mean, this is what was considered good graphics at the time. Oh, he's dead. Well, rats, man. Oh, shoot, I forgot to mention that. There's some random murderer named Sephiroth. Yeah, that's a thing. And they thought he was dead. How can I leave that? That's important. Who will be that? Oh, it's his assistant. The music's also pretty good in this game, considering the time, honestly. Ah, yes, and that's right. Shinra was trying to get to the Promised Land, which is an area that supposedly has all the power from the Earth that they could possibly imagine. Could probably power Midgar for like a really long time, but I mean, it's still draining the planet. It'll still destroy the entire Earth eventually, so it's not a good idea. I honestly have no idea what Sephiroth's motives are, though. Oop. So, yes, Vice President Rufus, who is the president's son, is the next person I'll have to fight. And so I'm going to do that battle as an example of a boss battle, and then I'll sign off and let this be the end of our nice presentation. That is, if I can figure out how you get outside. You get outside. Is there like a hole? No. Oh wait, there's a door right there. I'm done. Yeah, Aiden and editing here. So this extra segment went on for like 15 minutes and it was really long. The whole video was about a half an hour. And I started kind of fearing that maybe that was too long. So I'm going to leave you on this really cliche cliffhanger of me about to enter a door and just do something climatic. And you're just going to have to suffer through never knowing what's going to happen. Yeah, bye. I hope you enjoyed.